How's it going, guys? Welcome to today's video. Today we're talking all about farm equipment. I'm going to show you guys all the stuff that I have and all the stuff that I use to grow hay and to run cows and do all that good kind of stuff. So let's get into it. All right, so this is my chisel. It is a Kuhn, I believe, K-U-H-N. I got this in a trade. Actually, it's the same trade that I got my squeeze chute in. And it was sitting in a field that I was renting at the time. It was just sitting out there. I don't know when the last time it was used, but the guy was selling the property and he had no use for it anymore. And I, at the time, didn't think that my tractor would be able to handle it. But the frame was good, everything was here. It had the heavy shanks. These chisels came with thin shanks and thick shanks. This one had the thick ones. So it was really too good to pass up, so I grabbed it. So the reason that this ended up working out great for me is if you notice on the side, that shank in the front there is bolted onto the main frame. This shank right here is bolted onto the main frame. And then there was actually one more shank bolted onto the outside. So in a nutshell, this chisel could be as wide as 16 feet or as narrow as 11 feet. And I was pretty sure that my tractor could pull 11 foot, especially if the field had been disked already. And it does. So this thing works good. What I'll usually do in the spring is I'll disc the field after I get the hay off of it, and then I'll come through with the chisel because it will get down a little bit deeper than the disc. I did have to replace some of the springs on the shanks, which that was not easy to find, but thank goodness for the internet. Had to replace the hoses on the ram, but other than that, the ram is good. It doesn't even leak or anything, which was shocking, honestly. I think the hoses were leaking, but that was about it. Now, you can see here on the tongue, we had to do a little bit of surgery there, but I mean, that's no big deal. What happened there is the guy that owned this before was pulling it with like a D6 or something that was way over horsepowered for this chisel. And I think what probably happened is he was leaving the chisel down when he was making turns, and that's how he screwed the tongue up. My tractor is pretty low horsepower, and it will sit there and spin tires before it goes around bending the tongue. That pretty much does it for the chisel. Let's check out this disc. So you guys that have real horsepower on your farms are probably laughing at how cute this little disc is. This is a 10-foot Domries. This is actually designed to be used in orchards. But there's no reason why it can't work in a hayfield too. I mean, a disc is a disc, right? It's, for as narrow as it is, like I said, 10 foot, it actually cuts really well. It's got 24-inch blades. So it's basically, you know, the way I look at it, it's like it's got all the features of a big disc, but everything's just compacted down into a 10-footer. So I guess if I had one complaint with this disc, it's that just sometimes it's not heavy enough to cut the ground. But this last year I made those cement weights for the aerator that's back at the ranch, and I'm thinking that it wouldn't be very hard to just make a little cradle to hold those weights on this disc, and then this thing should cut, I mean, no problem then. All right, so this guy is definitely not as big as the stuff that we were just looking at, but for what it's designed for, it works pretty good. So if you can't tell by looking at it, this is a ditcher, or I use it, it actually won't pull like a full-on ditch, but it's what I use it for is for drains at the end of the field. So when it's attached to the tractor, it would be up more like this. Your 3-point arms hook on right here, and you know would be pulling it that way, obviously, and it just kind of stabs into the ground and fluffs the dirt off to the side and makes a nice little toe drain. And no, this thing is not going to be winning any beauty contests, but this is something that I just threw together with some spare scrap metal that I had laying around. If you were to go buy something like this, you'd probably be looking at least $1,000. And like I said, I made this out of just scrap metal. The toughest part when making a blade like that is getting the radius in the blade. So the trick to doing that is you just get, like, I think that was originally a piece of 12-inch pipe, and I just cut it long ways that gives you the perfect radius right there. So real quick, I'll put this guy in the video too, not because this is some fancy crazy machine that no one's ever seen before. In fact, I think probably everybody has one of these for working up their garden, and that's exactly what I do with it. But I like this old plow because it's, you know, I wish I knew how old it was. It's definitely older than me. It's probably, I mean, I'm gonna say at least 50 or 60 years old, and it still works just as good as the day it was new. If you're a regular viewer, you've definitely seen this trailer get used a lot in the videos. This is a 16-foot Cherokee stock trailer. Now, to tell you the truth, I really didn't want a 16. I would have preferred an 18 or a 20. But I also didn't want to buy a brand new one. And these trailers are really hard to find used because they're aluminum, so in theory they should last forever or almost forever. So it is tough to find a good used one. I happened to find, I actually had to drive like 300 miles to get this, and the guy that was selling it just used it to take fair steers to the fair, so it had a pretty easy life. And I figured, well, yeah, I would prefer it if it was a little bit longer, but for the price and for the condition, I just had to get it. So if you're thinking about getting a stock trailer, I really suggest looking at an aluminum one. They're a lot more expensive, that's true, but the steel trailers require so much more upkeep over the years. And for me, when I'm putting out a lot of money like that, I like to buy something that's gonna last forever, or at least a really long time. And an aluminum trailer will do that. Steel trailers, trust me, I had one before. You're gonna end up rebuilding the floor, and they're heavy, you know, they're really heavy. Whereas the aluminum ones, they're light, they're strong, they don't rust, they don't rot. So it's kind of a buy once, cry once kind of thing. So another thing that you guys have seen plenty of is my 2014 Honda Pioneer 700. Now, why a Honda instead of a Polaris or some other brand? That's pretty easy. When you buy farm equipment or something that you want to use on the ranch, well, for me anyway, the number one priority is that it's reliable. And Honda's got a pretty solid reputation of being reliable, so that's why I went with the Pioneer. It's got a gear transmission instead of a belt drive like most of the other ones have. So it's good for like creeping, slow, and pulling stuff. You're not gonna have to worry about burning up belts and things like that. Plus, I mean, it's got a Honda 700 motor, same one that's been in the rink on forever. So it's a proven power plant. And so yeah, I love this Honda. Yeah, I've got over 7,000 miles on that Pioneer, which, I mean, for a car, that would be nothing, but for a side-by-side, that's a lot, and no problems to speak of. All right, so this is my 6-foot New Holland brush mower, chopper, shredder, whatever you want to call it. I gotta be honest with you guys, I wouldn't recommend a friend buy this. I haven't been super happy with it. It doesn't cut very low, which, I mean, I know, just by design, it's not gonna. The thing that I dislike about it the most is when you're in somewhat tall grass, or even short grass for that matter, whatever the tractor drives over and flattens down, the mower doesn't suck that up and cut it. I don't know, that might be true of all these little 3-point shredders, but anyway, that's my complaint with this thing. But what I like about this thing is that it is narrow, so it's great for like getting into tight corners. I'm going to use it this year over at the winter pasture to chop berry vines, and that'll be perfect over there because we'll be getting in between trees and in a lot of tight spaces that a bigger mower just wouldn't fit. Okay, so here we have another contraption that I built, and this here I'm worried that we might get into like regional differences. So around here I call this a float, and I would assume that that's what everyone calls it, but I don't know, because I know when you go to different places, people call different pieces of equipment different things. Good example, in this area, we call what everyone else calls a combine, we call a harvester. So, funny, quick story. When I was in college, I was in an ag mechanics class, and one of the things that we had to do was give a safety talk on a different piece of equipment. So the teacher kept saying, how come no one does a combine? How come no one does a combine? And I'm sitting in the class and I'm like, what in the hell is a combine? You know, then I finally figured out, it dawned on me, or I think I saw a picture of it or something. He was talking about a harvester. I know the rest of the world calls them combines, but anyway, off track. So the way that this thing works is we pull these lower pins out on both sides, and then this top pin acts as a hinge. This axle will flip out and on top of the frame. And the same thing up here in the front. Pull the bottom pin, top pin acts as a hinge, and this tongue will flip over on top of the float. So once you've got the axle and the tongue flipped up, that frame will be sitting flat on the ground. And you'll hook the tractor up to it on the other side and pull it, and it just drags on the ground. And there are three bars here. So we got this bar here, another one here, another one there. So those are on a slight angle, and as you drag them on the ground, if you've done your groundwork right, it'll actually do a pretty darn good job of smoothing that out. All right, this is my Schmeiser ring roller, and you guys have seen me use this in videos in the past. So what this thing does is it hooks up to the back of the disc or the back of the float or the back of the harrow or the back of the aerator. It can hook up to pretty much anything. You almost never would pull this thing just by itself. But what it does is these spiked wheels roll on the ground. And I can't really roll it, but it's heavier than it looks. But anyway, those spiked wheels roll on the ground and they stab and break up clods. And just to be clear, the rubber tires would not be on it while it's in the field. That's just for getting it down the road. That was actually like probably my biggest problem with this thing is it was just hard to transport because, you know, they don't come with wheels on them. I don't really know. I mean, some of them do, but obviously this one didn't. So I made some little brackets just to put wheels on there, and that way it was really easy to get it up and down the road. All right, guys, last thing on the list is going to be this Powder River squeeze chute. And I know this isn't really what we think about when we think of farm equipment, but to me, having a good squeeze chute is so important. It is high on my list of the pieces of equipment that I have that I really value. So this is a pretty old chute. I actually had to do a little bit of work on it to get it functional again. But if you have animals, you're gonna have animals, you really owe it to yourself and to your animals to get one of these, because it's not just about making it easy for you, it's also about making it safe for you, and it's also about making it safe for your animals. They're kind of the way that these were invented was they realized that squeezing the animal actually has a calming effect on it. So, or that's what they say. I've had a few crazy ones get in there and I had them squeeze pretty good, and it didn't seem to calm them down too much. But for the most part, when you catch them in there, you know, you catch their head and you squeeze their body, they're just kind of like, all right, they got me. So, yeah, it's better for the animal. It's better for you. If you're going to do livestock, you got to have one. And I know, man, they're expensive. It's kind of ridiculous what they've gone up to. I looked, the last time I checked, I think Powder River's cheapest chute was like $3,000 or $4,000, which is just crazy. But I would say, you know, keep your eyes open for used ones. They do come up every once in a while. And honestly, I mean, I'm sure it's different everywhere, but around here, I see a lot of chutes that are just like, you know, somebody bought it 50 years ago and whoever was running cows sold out, retired, whatever. And people don't like resell them for some reason. So my point is, if you want a chute, just kind of drive around and keep your eyes open. And if you see like an old rundown corral system, odds are there might be a chute sitting back there somewhere. Like the one that I found, or this one right here, was sitting in a corner of a field with all the parts down on the ground. In fact, I drove by it probably 10 times and I thought it was an incomplete chute until I actually talked to the guy that owned it. He's like, oh yeah, everything's there, it's just on the ground. And he was right, it was all there. Fixed it up, gave it a paint job, as good as new. So if you can't quite stomach the cost of a new one, which I totally understand, just keep your eyes open, look around. Don't be afraid to go knock on someone's door and ask them, you know, if they want to sell it. A lot of people would probably, you know, don't think it's worth anything, and you might be able to get a really good deal on it. All right, guys, well, that's going to do it for this one. Hope you enjoyed checking out all my stuff, and hopefully this list will get longer as, you know, years go on. Anyway, so thanks for hanging out with me today, and I hope I'll see you again on Farmer Tyler Ranch.